Ginny and Aj would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land across the countries now known as Australia and the United States of America. These lands that were never ceded but violently stolen from the oldest living cultures and civilization on this planet. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture, and hopes of a brighter future for us all. It's also important that we acknowledge the Gumaroi, Barkinji, Lachi Lachi, Birigubba, and Waka Waka ancestors and elders of our bloodlines, whose shoulders we stand on. Without them, we do not exist. It's through them that we carry our pride, strength, and resiliency. We must always remember that under this concrete and asphalt, these countries were and always will be on traditional Aboriginal, Australian, and Native American land.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unapologetically Blak. We are so excited to be back here yet again, yarning with you all. This is our episode 3. Judy, how are you feeling?
I'm
for
good.
episode 3?
I mean, we just came off a really sensitive week, but I feel good. Like, I just want to I should thank everyone who reached out and sent beautiful messages of love and support. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders, but I mean, how lucky we are to have like a deadly little, following of people who support us. And so I really appreciate that, everyone.
Yeah.
But we're in episode 3 already.
I know, I was about to say, Ginny, it just feels like we were sitting here yesterday yarning, and that's the thing, guys. Life is so fast. I feel like 2021 is just straight off the bat. So we're so appreciative that all of you guys are still managing to, take time out to engage with our content and then give us that feedback. So speaking of feedback, one of our biggest requests last year for season 2 was for Ginny and I to talk about our educational or our schooling experience. And being women and being First Nations, I feel like this is a really, really important conversation to have, because I feel like often we're hearing about school or education from the perspective of statistics or other bodies,
Right.
but we're not hearing actual Indigenous stories, if that makes sense. So let's get stuck into it, Ginny. If you want to tell us a little bit about your educational journey, obviously if you could touch on primary school as well and high school, I think that'd be really nice to hear that progression, what that was like.
Okay, so for me, and now that everyone knows, being in foster care, I moved around a little bit. So I think I went to like 6 primary schools. I was trying to count in the shower this morning. I think I went to 6 in the 7 years that I spent in primary school at the time. I think I went to 6 different schools. So all around Brisbane. And I think for me, thinking about primary school, I don't know. I don't have any real big feelings about primary school. I did spend a lot of my primary school at an Indigenous school in Brisbane, the Murray School. So that was a really deadly experience. And I think for the most part, that's where I felt most comfortable. And then going into a mainstream school after that was quite a transition, because it was just like, I guess, weird, because at the Murray School we did things very differently. Instead of doing the national anthem in the morning, we would do Going in the Army.
Wow.
And lunch was made for us, and I didn't have to wear shoes to school. It was really, really relaxed. And I know a lot of people will look at that and be like, oh my God. But I think it's important to acknowledge that there are different ways of learning, and for a lot of Black kids, I think the Murray School is a safe space for them and makes sense for us culturally. So I really enjoyed the Murray School, but I also enjoyed mainstream school. It was just very different way of like making sure that everything was done, and then obviously a really large emphasis on education, making sure that like all of those, what are they called, NAT plan tests and stuff, really, really intense. But I enjoyed primary school for the most part. I think when I moved to Green Bank State School, our family was like one of the only Black families there.
Wow.
And so that was weird. I actually have a really fond memory of like I had like zero friends for a really long time. I had like no friends. And I found it really hard. It was at that point, grade 5, that I noticed that my skin color was different to other people. Like that I really started to recognize that I
So
was
true.
different, and I felt other kids pointing out the differences to me. Like,
And you told me you were dark when you were a child, because obviously you're in the Australian sun. But when I saw this photo, I was like, you were black. You were so brown, Ginny. And it just shows how, because obviously, you know, my skin has been lighter and darker, but I just feel like that it comes out, and that's Australian sun.
She sent me a message saying, Ginny, oh my God, you were right. You were really black. That American sun is just not hitting.
Literally, that hit right, girl. You were brown. And
I know. I was really, really brown. And so I think at that point I sort of started understanding what racism was and feeling the impacts of that. But I remember I had like zero friends, AJ, and then one day at our school, every year they did a performance in music where you had to do like a lip syncing challenge as part of music. I don't know why. It's very Glee. It was very Glee. Can you imagine? I was in grade 5.
I love it.
And you had to like perform in a group, and you'd have to get dressed up and do the song and all of that, but you would lip sync it. And the popular girls at my school were doing the Spice Girls. And I was the only Black kid at school, the only Black girl at school. So they asked me if I would be Scary Spice. And I was like, of course. And then it was really lucky that we became our group of friends. And throughout the rest of primary school, like I fit in, but I was very much like the Black girl at school, that everyone would ask shitty questions and all the rest, like, but primary school was primary school. It was okay. It wasn't terrible. And then obviously when I moved to high school, that was again when I really realized, okay, we're talking all of those backhanded compliments about being Black from teachers all the way down to.
Were there many Indigenous kids at your school?
In high school there were, but it wasn't necessarily Aboriginal kids, or perhaps they were lighter, fairer skinned. Like,
I get what you mean. Yeah,
me and my sister were definitely like the people that everyone be like, oh, there's the Aboriginal girls. And then like, we hung out in a bigger group of kids. One of my best friends was Aboriginal as well, so there was us, but we would also hang out with like other brown kids, Samoan. Like we all hung out together and looked after each other, which was really deadly. But
so good.
For the most part, it was at that point that I really started to feel racism and like people saying stuff like, I felt like during primary school you would get teased and stuff, but it'd be like because you wore shitty shoes or you said the wrong answer. Or I remember in school one point I got called Regina, and that changed my whole life. It was the best
kids,
and worst
man.
Kids, yeah, they're horrible, aren't they?
No, they really are.
But I think like at high school, that's when I started noticing that more of the arguments or the teasing was more skin related and
so sad,
race related. Yeah, but
so sad.
I also just I don't know if it really affected me too much because a lot of girls were scared of us, even though I was like the least confrontational person. Like,
love it.
I knew that I could just kind of walk around and be like, hey, and people would
so here for that. Yes.
Like, don't get her mad. And my older sister used to look out for me a lot. If anyone ever said anything, like, I was in a big foster family. There was almost a kid in every single grade. So if someone started something, all 10 of us were showing up,
back each other up. Oh, I love that.
But what about you? What was school like for you, AJ?
So guys, trigger warning, trigger fucking warning. My primary school was horrendous. So I went to a primary school in far western New South Wales. I've talked about it before, Broken Hill. It was absolutely your worst nightmare. I'm not going to get into that because it is too triggering, if that makes sense. But it was so I'll talk more about the school. Okay, so we had I'm not going to get into the racism and how happened and what was said, just because I'm not ready to get into that. It's too traumatic. But I'll give you guys one example of the institution that was my school at the time. So they had specific days. So you had a day where you dress up as what you want to be. Now, guys, you understand dress up days are really hard for poor families, and at that time we were dirt poor, so my mum could not afford to get us costumes, could not afford to dress us up. And there are a lot of other kids at the school, black, white, and anything in between, that couldn't just black or white. So we had no other races, just Aboriginal or white, couldn't afford it. Okay, so if you didn't have a costume, you'd sit on the side of the parade and you just kind of sit in the corner. So that happened to us, but with a lot of other kids as well. A lot of them were black and some were white, but we had dress up day. So what do you want to be when you get older? A dress up day would be color day, so everyone would wear in a specific color. One of the days, guys, was Colonial Day. So people dressed up in colonial clothes and walked around in a parade, and their parents would come and watch them. So reliving arguably the most, or one of the most traumatic times is the arrival
in history,
of
let alone your life, but history.
And I said to my mom, I was like, what did you think, Mom? I was like, what did you want to do? And my mom, I'm sure you relate, Ginny, because our Queensland women are like that. Like, they either have a lot to say or they don't. So my mom's one of those. Yeah, exactly. I can never shut my mom up, or I'll be like shaking her to get answers out. I'll be like, tell me more, God damn it.
Right.
And this was one of those stories. So me and my sister have been cracking away at, Mum, what were your thoughts on Colonial Day? Because obviously she didn't dress us up in the clothing. She said, I wanted to dress you two in a Hessian sack, because that's what our ancestors used to wear, like sugar bags. And my mom's like, I wanted to dress you guys up in that because that's what we were wearing. I was like, Mum, you should have put us in fucking chains, like have us in fucking chain gangs.
Literally.
Honestly.
Could you imagine? They'd be like, oh, that's offensive. Oh no, that's too much. You've gone too far.
Literally, I think the fucking admin of the school would have had a fucking heart attack. But that was it for me. And then we moved to Sydney for high school, and I think my mum and dad really saw the impacts of the primary school and what that had on me and my sister. But high school was very bad, but primary school prepared me for that. So nothing compared to primary school, but it was also very bad. And because I've always been like so pro-Black, and I will fight you for Indigenous rights and I will not stop, like, and once bullies know your weak point, which was my race, you know, you can call me fat, you can call me ugly, I don't give a crap, you can call me dumb. I know all those things are not true, but if you come for my Aboriginality, I will fight you tooth and nail. And unfortunately that happened quite a bit.
No, it sounded like you had a rough time.
It wasn't, Ginny. It was rough. It was so rough. And I feel like a lot of people listening to this that are Indigenous, and I'm sure you maybe had a similar experience. We kind of started out with a lot of Indigenous kids. So maybe there was like 7 or 8 of us in our year. But by year 12, it was just me and my other friend who were Indigenous and graduated in my year. But I do want to add, guys, you know me, I'm a little bit modest, but I don't like these types of frames or these names, but it's important that I recognize it. I was the first Indigenous school captain at my school. My school was very known for Indigenous people and Indigenous families, my high school, but it was open for 200 and something years.
And you were the first.
Colonial school. Yeah, it was a boys' school originally, and then co-ed, and they'd never had one. So
wow. I think my youngest sister was the first at our school in Brabby Island as well.
Oh my God.
Was she the first? Or maybe not. No, yeah, she was. Yeah, and her boyfriend was Indigenous as well. Is Indigenous, not dead or anything, but yeah. So they was. Sorry, was. He is blackfellow too. So they were like the first, and there were a pair of them, which was pretty deadly. But no, I totally understand that. But I think for you, like, it sounds. What I love to hear about you is, like, you know, you were pretty aware of like who you were and what you stood for really quickly. I mean, you've known since forever, which is deadly. I think for me was a little bit different in that I knew I was Black. I looked Black. I understood that I was different. But I really spent a good part of my years, and I'm sure there are other Black fellas out there who understand what I'm saying, like really trying to blend in and not make too much noise, because I knew that, you know what I mean? Like I never really stood up for anything because I knew what that came with, and
That's
that
so
would just bring
true.
more attention to the fact that I was different to everyone. I was
That's so
really
right.
trying so hard to just be like any
Just to
other kid
fit
at school.
in.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that you said that, Ginny, because we have to have that within an Indigenous experience. And Ginny has some tips. So we're going to get into that. But I think leading into that is so important is if you are Indigenous or you have Indigenous children in your school, you can't, or any capacity in your life, or you're trying to understand the schooling system, you can't expect us to be, activists and fighting for
Right.
Indigenous rights because, they're teenagers, they're going through puberty, or if they're in primary school, they're, learning about themselves. So you can't always do that, if that makes sense.
And I think you find teachers as well who are like, why don't you do this?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I'm literally
Just let me be a normal student. Like, they always try to reel you in.
And my foster mum was, so, I said this last week, she was the school bus driver when I first, at the Murray School, when I first went home with her. But then when we went to school, she became our, CEC, the community education counselor. And so she was at school all the time. So I got roped into everything all the time. And for a really long time, I was like, I'm trying to fit in. Like, I don't know if I want to be doing corroboree on, parade every morning. Like, blackfellas, you will understand this. Like, sometimes, it is, I'm glad that I did it and I was forced to do it. But at the same time, like, I was like, I don't want to bring attention to myself because kids are fucking horrible.
They're horrible. They're so horrible.
Any reason to pick on you. So for a long time, I was like despising everyone. But I think it got to a point where in like grade 11, I had this like kid, his name's Todd. I will never forget him. Todd, you motherfucker. No, Todd, I hate you. I hate you so much. And you know what, Todd? I don't even know how your life turned out, but I can only imagine. And he literally pulled me up in social science. Like, it was like we were talking about, we had a lesson where the teacher was like, okay, we're going to reimagine the Australian flag. This was one of the first times I think I ever heard a teacher, though, talk about this flag doesn't represent all Australians. And she was like, we're going to reimagine what the flag should look like. So, I want you guys to come up with it. And then I remember Todd being like, well, it's not like they don't get anything. And he was like, they get free houses, they get free cars. And my parents have to work so hard. And it was at that point I decided, all right, Todd, I'm like, Todd. And he was like looking at me when he said it. And I was like, burning up. And I just said, are you felt like it was shady as fuck. And also shots were fired. So I literally, it was at that point I said, well, if houses are free and cars are free, like, where can you tell me where I need to go pick this shit up? Because
so true.
I haven't had access to it, mate. And there are still people to this day and age that literally think we get everything handed on a platter. You think we'd be in jail? You think we'd be so overrepresented in every
committing crimes in the first place?
Literally,
that's people make out crimes.
People make out. That we literally get everything. And I'm like, why do I have 15 people sleeping in my house? Like, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. And obviously this is a reflection of his parents and what he's heard at school. Because kids, we don't think for ourselves like that. So, and
that's exactly right, because it just keeps being passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah,
these racial stereotypes. So speaking of generation to generation, I have some facts to share with you all about the education system and Indigenous people in this country. So it's going to be able to provide us guys some context as to what we're talking about. And unfortunately, we're not taught about this. If you learn about Indigenous people in this country, they're not going to teach you about how it was we were not allowed to go to school or have an education.
Right.
So we're going to kick this off. So in 1814, Governor Macquarie opens a school for Aboriginal children at Parramatta called the Native Institute. So this was not a school in any shape or sense what you may think it is, but it was an institute to civilize, educate, and foster habits of industry and decency in the Aborigines. Now, that is a direct quote. The local Aboriginal people at the time were having their children removed. They were being forced to live in these environments or live away from their children while they attended the institute. But then the school was closed in 1820, so it was open for 5 years, and you can imagine the damage that was done. And it's ultimately assimilation. So then we have in 1937, the policy of protection for Aboriginal people marks the beginning of the Catholic Church in relation to the ministry work and the establishment of schools for Aboriginal children. So this is what we got to learn. So when we went to school, it was literally religion. 1948, the Board of National Education established in New South Wales states it's impractical to provide any form of education for the children of Blacks. So that is 1948, guys.
It's crazy.
1870, in the early 1870s, the first Aboriginal children are enrolled in public schools in New South Wales. By 1880, there are 200 Aboriginal children in school in New South Wales. So 1883, white parents object to about 16 Aboriginal children attending a public school at Yass. So the Minister of Education, George Reid, at the time, stops the children attending and states that although in general creed or colour should not exclude a child, cases may arise among the Aboriginal tribes where the admission of a child or children may be prejudicial to the whole school. So what they're saying is if a Black child is damaging the school ethos, they can't attend. So it's absolutely horrendous.
And they decide, I guess, how what damage looks and sounds and feels like is the other thing.
Exactly, Ginny. So they're saying, oh, we've got Black kids in school, but you're dragging them out whenever you feel like it, which is horrendous. So 1909, the New South Wales Aboriginal Protection Act is introduced following a crisis in public schools. So the act also made it illegal for half-caste to live on reserves. In 1958 and 1918, amendments to the act gave the New South Wales Aborigines Protection Board greater powers to remove children from their families. So 1946, Aboriginal children need medical certificates to attend public school. 1950, Aboriginal children assimilate into New South Wales local schools if all other parents agree. The right of veto is removed in 1960. So it wasn't until 1960 that white parents could vote out Black children from attending the school. So if those white parents all the way up till 1960 did not want Aboriginal children there, they could vote them out. And also in 1950, the first formal schooling for Aboriginal children in the Northern Territory is provided. Lack of facilities rationalised the claim that children beyond the age of 10 couldn't keep up with white children anyway. So they were attending school up until 10. 1959, Margaret Williams is the first Aboriginal university graduate with a diploma in physical education. 1965, Charles Perkins becomes the first university graduate at Sydney University with a Bachelor of Arts. So he's also the first Aboriginal to graduate from university in New South Wales. Margaret Valden in 1966 becomes the first Aboriginal university graduate at Queensland University. She goes on to become the first postgraduate student as well. 1971, principals of schools in New South Wales are no longer able to exclude Aboriginal children because of home conditions or community opposition. And then in 1976, the establishment of the New South Wales Aboriginal Education Consultative Group, AECG, was founded.
Wow. Look how far we've come, you guys.
Oh my God. My brain is literally so scrambled and triggered by reading that.
Like what the hell?
Country.
And you wonder why. We wonder why. You know, I think it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but I think it's laughable that, you know, non-Indigenous people, white fellas, cannot see the disparity and how this still may be affecting kids who are in school right now. And I think that's what when someone suggested that we do an episode about schooling, I know that we've come we haven't come far enough, but we've come far, and that there are a lot of now teachers who are interested in trying to support Indigenous children a lot more. And I think that's what, I mean, if we understand where we came from, we understand where we're going and why we're heading the way that we're heading. Why aren't there more Indigenous kids graduating from school? Well, their parents probably never finished school because they were never given the opportunity to do that. So
no. And even the idea of schools, guys, like if you're going to get anything from this, from me contributing to this episode, it's really understanding that schools are institutions to kind of black out, to white out blackness. So if you are Black in any way, shape or form, like even in speech, in diction, or in language, or in understandings of, like community and society and like the way to behave in a school, they are going to beat you with the stick so you conform to what they want. And even in this 21st century, so even now, like I've got my daughter who's getting ready for school next year, that's my biggest concern, is that my daughter is going to be held to these white standards where it's like, sit down and cross your legs while you listen to the story. And as you know, like children are visual learners. Children, when they hear stories, their bodies go on journeys, their bodies can transcend, and they can really get enthralled in this book or this story. So if they want to lay back, or they want to lean, or they want to just stretch out on the floor and listen to the story, they're not allowed to do that. They're a bad student. And that's actually how you retain more information, is switching off your body, not sitting rigid and straight in an uncomfortable position. So my bit to this is, guys, is understanding the history of schools, understanding that they're all unique experiences. And that's why it's so important that we're site specific with working with the schools and their specific histories as well.
Right.
Because the impacts, they're being felt in communities like where I grew up. And I think underlying it is still that desire to just whitewash blackness. That makes sense.
For sure. And I totally agree with you, AJ. I think we're seeing a lot of parents now who have children. We're at a point in the world where I think we have a better understanding of what learning disabilities are, and that there are different ways of learning for people. However, we've been trying to say this for a very long time, for our people, when we were colonized, English isn't our first language, and still to this day, I think Black fellas are feeling the effects of that sort of, the colonization, and how, I think it's just interesting that we have so many people now who understand what learning disabilities are, and advocating for students to be learning differently, and different ways of getting things done. But we haven't had that same sort of respect and that same sort of advocacy as students. And, like you were saying, AJ, when you started school, there might have been 7 Black fellas, and then by the time you finished, there was only 2. Like, we know that I know for sure, even in my, at my school, I saw the same sort of things happen. In grade 8, seemed like there was heaps of Black fellas, and by grade 10, we were down more than half. And it's because of those disciplinary, this is how things are done, and this is how you talk, and you need to wear a formal school uniform on a Monday and a sports uniform on a Friday, and you need to be here at 9 a.m. and you need to be, have detention, and this needs to be done. And not understanding that we as Black fellas may learn differently, that as Black fellas may still be dealing with the effects of intergenerational trauma and colonization at home, that is affecting what time we get to school, or how we wake up, or whether we can afford uniforms. That was
so true. That's a perfect example, is being even able to afford uniforms.
Yeah,
because that's a privilege. Like every year, or whenever their children grow out of the school shoes, being able to afford those.
We would have to, whatever uniform you had would be passed down. As soon as you moved up a side, you passed it down to the next person. And I remember even before I even started primary school, I remember my mum taking me to the lost and found bin at school before it even started, and she was just like,
So
"We'll find it,"
smart.
because it's smart and resourceful,
So
but
smart,
it's
yeah.
such a memory that I have in my
I
head,
can
her being like,
imagine.
"Just take whatever you can, whatever taking it," you know. And that was the thing, is like going to school, I noticed those sorts of things when people had deadly new uniforms on, and I
It's
was
so
still
you
wearing.
notice, yeah, every
Yeah.
school year when they come in with their new t-shirts, exactly right.
And people let you know, are like, "Oh, like your uniform is old as fuck," or
So
whatever.
true.
It
It's
was
got stains
always
and
a thing,
shit.
and it affects how we learn. No one wants to
It's
go
so
to school and be
true.
called a coon one day,
Mm,
and then be sitting in a classroom with that person and trying to
trying
learn.
to learn. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, they're the same thing at the same time. And
literally.
I do want to give one example, okay? Because I feel like I'm not going to get into my trauma because it's just too much. But I want to give one example. So I have curly hair. My sister has a lot of curlier hair than mine. So as you guys know, I've talked about it before. My mum's from Queensland, so my mum's from Cherbourg. And on the mission, if you had like scaly skin or if you had unkept hair or anything like that, that was justification for them to remove your children. So there's no question, there's no ifs, there's no buts. If your child goes to school with unkept hair or skin that looks dry, your child's not coming home. Okay, so that's a reality, and for a lot of different people with missions, that is a similar story. So my mum would put our hair in pigtails or a ponytail, but because we have curly hair, so something like what you guys can see in the video, you guys know what a curly hair looks like in a ponytail. It's different textures, it's flying around, it's twisting, it's curling, it's doing whatever it wants to do. But to prevent the curls from coming out in our pigtails or ponytails, my mum would wet her hand and would turn the curl so it turns into a spiral.
Yes.
So I've seen other parents do it before,
Do that,
and
yeah.
especially in Queensland as well.
Yes.
So you turn the hair and it goes into a tight spiral. So my mum used to do that for us all the time. Her mum did that for her. Her aunt, her sisters did that for her. Her mother's mother did that for her. So this hairstyle of keeping our hair in a tight spiral was passed down generationally from our arrival or forced participation in the Cherbourg mission. So the children used to make fun of me, my sister. Why does your hair look like that? That looks like shit. That looks like a poo. Why is your hair in a twisted like that? What did you put on that? Did you put something on there? Is that glue on there? Like, just disgusting. And I'm 5 and I'm like, why are they saying my hair looks like poo? And it was brown, and it was like, talking about me having brown everything, right? And I'm just talking my head, tugging my hair, and my sister got the exact same thing. So what do? Mum, we don't want a hair like this. We don't want a hair like this. And my mum would force us and tell us, no, you have to have your hair like this. So a teacher would look at that and think, oh, well, they're just making fun of their hair. Get over it. That happens.
It's not that big of a deal. Yeah.
But they don't understand the historical, they don't understand the racial degradation that's behind that. And a lot, as you guys know, traditionally a lot of Indigenous people in this country had afros or curly hair or wavy hair, just texture in our hair. So they don't know the history of that as well. So I think these examples, guys, of something on the surface looking like nothing has deep, deep colonial roots.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Like, I worked for an organization for a really long time, working in schools with Indigenous kids, because that is something that I've always been super passionate about. But it is one of the hardest jobs that you could possibly think of, because when you're, I think non-Indigenous people will look at a child and think, it's so easy, he just needs to be here at 9 a.m. Like, can you please just get him to school on time, and not even understand that mom's at home going off because there's 6 kids at home that she needs to make sure they're all fed. We don't know the circumstances. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we don't allow for situations. We don't allow for the fact that we just expect Black kids to push through. And it's so hard if you don't have those sorts of skills, if you haven't been taught those sorts of skills, or how am I going to worry about passing a test when I don't know if I'm going to eat tonight? Like, it just makes zero sense to me. But I just will say, I don't want to compare Blackfellas to having kids with disabilities or learning difficulties, but we don't get advocated for in that same situation. It's like, and then we do the backhanded compliment of, like, when a Blackfella does finish school, it's like, oh my God, Indigenous guys, Did you
No.
know that he's Black and he has graduated? He might have been the first. Oh my God.
Oh, what about when that child, because I saw this so many times, when the child starts coming to school at 9 a.m., the teacher wants to make a fucking big deal out of it. Like, let's give him a round of applause. He came to school at 9 a.m. It's like, bitch, can you not shame this poor kid out? Like, you did what he wanted to do. Now treat him like everybody else. So when he wasn't doing what you wanted, he was alienated, he was publicly humiliated, and now you're doing the exact same thing. Like, it makes no sense.
It really doesn't. And that's what I mean is like, for a really long time through school, I just was trying to be as consistent as possible. I didn't like getting awards. I didn't like, I didn't like the praise. I didn't like the discipline. I literally just floated through school as quietly and as softly as I could, never really putting my hand up for anything. Because I didn't want to bring attention to myself. I didn't want that sort of attention on me, for people to be like, oh, I didn't notice she was the Black, or
true. And just people looking at you, that sense of vulnerability. Like, no child should have that. No child should have that fear. But like you said, so many Black kids, even right now in school, are doing the exact same thing, just trying to lay low.
And I think for us as well, like our generation, I think we really started to see a shift in like acknowledging, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So we were really like sort of shoved to the front of the line of everything. True. Like, oh, we're doing a parade for NAIDOC. Now you can all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids stand up in the school. Everyone have a look at them. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's the most fucking embarrassing thing.
You bring you so many memories.
Literally was like, everyone, if you're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, please stand up. And there'd be like 10 of us.
This is what you want to do.
Literally. God, I was just like, glasses. I looked around. I was like, I'm not fucking standing up. What the fuck? I don't want to stand up in front of 600 kids. And, like, that has nothing to do with how proud I am in my club. But what I am trying to say is this is not a circus for you mob to shove us to the front of and be like, dance, monkey, dance.
No,
dance,
and for one day a year. Like. And then it's like, get back to the cupboard now. Like, get back to the dark after that.
Regina, great. But your attendance now next week, 60%.
Oh, it's so they make comments like that.
Yeah,
they really do.
Oh, yeah, exactly like what you were saying. You show up 1 week on time, and it's like, oh my God, you could be anything. You know what, Regina? You could be the next prime minister.
I'm losing it. I need to mute.
She's muted herself because she knows what I'm talking about.
I'm losing it.
If I had $1 for every time a teacher or older white person said to me, you could be prime minister. You could be the next prime minister. I would be.
You could be an astronaut one day.
I'd be a millionaire is what I'd fucking be. Thank you.
Or like, even when you get good in a grade, like I remember I got really good once in biology and I was doing horrendous. Mm-hmm. And then my teacher was like, well, let's see if you can keep that up next week for the pop quiz. And I was like,
bitch, I'm just glad I got here. Okay, let's not think too far ahead.
I just can't. It's like you just devalued. I'd killed myself for this assignment or up all night. Well, let's hope you can do it tomorrow for the pop quiz. And I was like,
wow.
I quit.
Imagine. And that's the thing, right? It makes you just feel like, shit, I don't want to be at school. And, for a long time, it was I was really dragging my feet. And I barely graduated from high school because I was like, this shit is stupid. Toxic. After all of your good, friends, all the black fellas are gone by grade 10 because of the situation. It's like, why the fuck am I here?
That was my vibe. I literally wanted to go to a new school, but they had minimal in my cohort as well. I was like, no fucking point. Literally. I want to go to the Murray school, god damn it.
Yes. And that's what I mean is like the Murray school felt like home for me because everyone was the same, and I think that as non-Indigenous folks, you will never understand how nice it is to feel like you just belong somewhere. Mainstream schools are not built for us. They're not advocating for us in a way that they should. And I know that there are a lot of non-Indigenous folk who'll listen to this and be like, I'm a teacher and I'm doing the best I can. great, but listen, like,
Is
we're
your school though? Is your principal though? Is your deputy though?
right.
No, they're not. They're not carrying their weight.
Exactly.
Because if they
Exactly.
were, we would not be having racists in our country like they do, because like we do, because those racists attend your school and they grow up to be adults and they're people of influence, or they're just people in general that, you know, perpetuate these racial stereotypes and
Exactly.
mistreatment of Aboriginal people. Like, get it together.
Yeah. And I worked as a community education counselor after school. I went back to Mabel Park State High School in
Wow.
Brisbane. It's a very highly populated brown school. I'm going to call it a brown school.
Wow.
So lots of like Samoan, Tongan kids, lots of Aboriginal
Yeah.
kids, lots of Torres Strait Islander kids. And even as a community education counselor, the sorts of stereotypes that you hear, you know, I'm sitting in a staff room with other teachers who are perpetuating those stereotypes and racist remarks and stuff like that, and then coming to you with those stupid fucking questions like, you know, why do you think Joella's not coming to school on time? I know, why don't
Oh
you ask her?
God,
Like, it's
exactly.
really, 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 like, you know, I think I feel for these Indigenous
Mm,
people who are placed in these schools to be thrown workloads that, because it's too hard for
so true, Ginny.
non-Indigenous people to understand that
Mm,
there are different ways of doing things. And
100%.
I mean, my whole time at that school was really, really horrible. I don't know if I should have even mentioned it, but the principal
Mm,
at the time was a really horrible person and perpetuated a lot of those stereotypes. Like, was just too hard. You deal with it. Just make sure they're
oh my
here. Just make sure
God.
they're here, and you know, make sure they're here. Otherwise, you're going to lose your job. Like, it was that intense. It's very like
Wow.
um very, very
And you're an
horrible.
adult trying to navigate that. Like, imagine what those kids felt from him. Like, yuck.
Exactly. They knew and we're not stupid as
Yeah.
kids. We
So
understand when people
true.
look at you and how they look at you and what they
Mm,
say and how they say it. Everyone at that school knew what he was like, and
so
that
sad.
I can't imagine why I'd want to go to school if my principal thought I was a piece of shit and had no hope in hell.
Exactly.
You know, like, and I felt like a bloody Jackie. It was like my job to round him up. Come on, you mob,
Yeah.
like, get to school.
So
You
true.
know, and I just think like we need to reimagine what that position looks like
Mm,
as something that I've always had a really strong opinion on, and what I think, you know, we need to infiltrate as Black fellas the school system, and ensure that our kids are being taught how
so
we feel
true.
fit, or how they feel fit to be taught,
Mm,
but also like having a say in how we're taught and what we're taught.
so true.
But
Because I everything you just said, Ginny, like how we feel when we're being taught, it's like we become passive learners, you know. And then when you grow up, they're like, "Why are you not being an active learner? Like, why are you not engaging, like in the job force, in the workplace?" It's like,
right.
"Why are you not doing that? Why do you not?" Because you beat that out of me. Like, you taught me to be this submissive child that, you know, answers a
Mm,
question or memorizes everything you say, and then
right.
now I can't think outside the box. But as
Think for
adults, we're
myself.
just
Yeah.
expected to do that. So I feel like a lot of what we're saying, guys, is going to resonate to you if you are non-Indigenous along those lines. But if you are not Indigenous and you're trying to understand this, imagine that amplified, and imagine
Mm,
that deeply, deeply intensified, and not just for you, but your parents and your lineage of indigeneity, because
mm,
that's what it's been like since the arrival of the British for us in schools, unfortunately.
yeah. I mean, again, like, the system is just not built for us. It's not
No,
thought with us in mind. And
no.
I just think like it's a horrible system to be a part of, and it's one that we have
Mm,
to be a part of. We don't get to
so
choose,
true.
because, you know,
Yeah.
when you don't show up to school, mom and dad's Centrelink gets cut off. It's like
That's
this
it.
whole system is built against us, you know.
So true,
You get
Ginny.
expelled because you don't, you know, you're being disciplined and talked to like a piece of shit.
Mm,
And I know that this is not all for every child ever, but I'm just saying, like, things that and I can speak because I've had lived experience as a Black person in
mm,
school, and what I've seen is that, you know, I know kids have been expelled because that, I mean, expelled at much crazier rates than I ever saw white kids being
so true. I
disciplined
can
or
speak here
expelled
for
at.
it.
And,
I can
you
speak
know,
here for it.
then their parents' Centrelink gets cut off, and then the effects of that, it's this
too
system
much.
is built against us, and it's not for us. That's all I can say.
And we need you guys to recognize that. So if you are engaging with Unapologetically Black and supporting our content, understand the importance of us speaking up and speaking out. Because like we say every episode, guys, this is not easy to talk about. Please don't for a second think like once Ginny and I say goodbye to each other, we're just going to be like, okay, let me take a selfie, or let me, I don't know, go make a smoothie. Like it does take a toll, if that makes sense. And that is why I love working with you, Ginny, and having these discussions, because I have not seen it happen and accessible like this in grassroots. So thank you.
And also I just think like a more very honest conversation about what school is like as blackfellas, because I think for the most part when we do hear about school from blackfellas, they are the 1%, the
1%.
Yeah, the 1% of kids who do graduate school and then are placed up on this pedestal. Can you imagine?
I had a great experience at Termile High School. It's like, we did it, the rest of us did it.
Exactly. You're asking that one kid to speak on behalf, and we know we're not stupid. When you sit us up on that pedestal, we know we've been trained our whole lives when to speak, how to speak, what to speak on, how to say it, what tone to use. We understand. So when you place us on that pedestal and we go, Parkridge High School was the best high school ever, and I'm so glad. And 12 other blackfellas got kicked out by grade 10 because they didn't meet your standard of school. And I remember even sitting in staff rooms and them talking about, we need to get rid of this student because they're bringing the average of the attendance down.
I've heard that as well.
And so,
or the ATAR, like I don't know if you have that in Queensland, but like the end result of the year 12 cohort, we need to get him out of here.
He's pulling the results down for everyone, and literally just speaking about kids as numbers. And I think like we need to stop doing that. And I don't know how that happens. I don't have all the answers, but I know that is definitely part of the issue. And if we're not used as numbers in that space, we're used in numbers as, and now we have 80% attendance by the Indigenous kids at school. And so now our Indigenous budget has gone up because the government is giving us money for blah, 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 blah. And so, we are taught from day one that we are a number. Yeah. And that number has changed for us. When we were younger, the number would have been just like, oh, you are a number and here you are, and congratulations. But I know as I got older and then started feeling the pressure of like, now there's budgets and we're talking like the Indigenous budget, that you start to become a different sort of number, like, now it feels like people care about what's happening with me.
I know, you get tricked into
it. It's about the money. And
that's exactly right.
And then coming back and doing that full circle as a CEC and being told, I can't imagine the Indigenous budget, like you need to make sure that we get to here. It's all
so disturbing.
It's horrible. It's a horrible system. And so if you are non-Indigenous and you work in schools, like this is the sort of stuff that we're talking about. This is the shit that needs to change. And I can understand, like we said earlier, I've met a lot of non-Indigenous teachers. I get hit up in my inboxes all the time like, oh, I'm really trying to engage our kids.
Oh, me too.
Would love for you to come in and be a role model. Like,
so speaking of tips and tricks, you said you've got some points.
Yeah, I wrote down a few things that I thought, because again, like this is, like we just said, one of the biggest DMs, direct messages I ever get is from educators asking about how they can engage Indigenous students. So I put a little list together. I just have 4 points, main points. The first one is that as educators, you must understand that how our children are viewed by people. So by understanding that there's already a public perception or a stereotype or stereotypes and racism being perpetuated in these spaces, I think you will, just by even listening to this now, hopefully you've been able to, take the information that we've given you and see this from a different perspective, which is that of 2 Black women who have engaged in the schooling system.
So true.
That we understand that we are viewed differently at school and in public and by the public. And the sooner that you guys get onto that and realize that is part of the issue, the better.
Yeah.
And it's
So
not about,
true.
it's obviously we want to see change, but even just acknowledging that this exists, saying like, I don't see children any differently. They're all just my kids. That's a load of shit. We're all starting at different.
Can I put that on a t-shirt? Then even this fucking one line as a kid.
I know, isn't it terrible?
They always say they're my kids and I don't care what color you are. I was like,
I don't see color.
Of course you care.
They're just my kids. No, they're not. They're not your kids, because if they were your kids, they would be treated differently.
It's so true.
We just need you to acknowledge that, unfortunately, Black children are disproportionately disciplined in school.
So true.
That's
Ginny.
fact. That's fact. So
true.
And you can't tell me otherwise unless you're Black.
No.
Then you can come and step to me. But even then, I've got questions for you. So just acknowledging that we are disproportionately disciplined in school, we're more likely to be suspended and expelled. And even just by watching the news, you're already, if you're watching the news, you understand that they are already creating a stereotype or reinforcing stereotypical views. So we as Black fellas are often, typecasted as criminals, as people who don't finish school, as people who get pregnant, as people who live off the system. We get free housing, we get free cars, all the rest. We are from day one, in any way, shape and form, publicly stereotyped as those people, and white people will always be the victim.
So fucking true, Ginny.
Of all of those things. They're always the victim of the criminalization. They're always the victim of the money that's being spent. They're the victim of the taxes, the victim of the disruption at school. So just by understanding that how we are viewed as people will give you a better idea of how to engage with Indigenous students. That's just how I feel about it. The second point, we as educators, we must recognize that all children see race. Maybe not as toddlers. I've seen those videos where we don't understand race. I've seen the video.
So true.
Okay? I know
was that done in Australia? Because these kids in Australia are on something else. Let me tell you that much.
This little black boy and a little white boy holding hands. I've seen the video. Okay, yes, touched myself for about 3.5 seconds until I took my nieces and nephew to school. Okay?
Yeah, so true.
We need to recognize that children we see race, and I think part of that is that we also know that children develop racial biases by about the age of 5.
Wow.
That's a statistic. That's a fact. And we know as well that children will resemble the racial attitudes of their parents.
So true.
So despite the fact that, John and Mary might be great parents and all of their kids are well-groomed and all the rest, they might still be placing their racial biases and attitudes. Yes, exactly, rednecks, onto their children, and then Black children are then the victims of those children. So just acknowledging that that children see race, and that as an educator, it's your job to help break down those barriers and those stereotypes, and make sure that Black children are not negatively affected by these stereotypes, in some way, shape or form. That's just, I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying that that's something that I think we need to focus on. Yeah. Number 3, I said children will learn best from educators, administrators, teachers, principals, deputy principals, the janitor, the school. We don't even call them janitors. This is the thing. School groundsmen, cleaners, cooks, whatever. When they're going to learn best from those sorts of people when they are culturally competent.
So true, Ginny.
And not your culturally competent. Culturally competent. Exactly. Culturally competent competence as taught by people of color or by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that, we decide when you're culturally competent. Right. You don't decide. A little certificate doesn't make you culturally competent. True. So that's another thing. I think that as schools, and I know that a lot of schools will say, we do cultural awareness training.
What does that even
Why?
mean?
Because you get money from Reconciliation Australia for doing it. Clap for the handicap. I'm sorry, it's not good enough.
Exactly.
I'm
And
sorry.
handicaps are those teachers that are attending it.
Literally. And we know you don't want to be there. I've seen it.
I
It's
know.
horrible. It's horrible. So I'm just saying, you know, we need to look at what cultural competency looks like, and that needs to be as taught and created by Black followers. So unless that's happening by Black followers, then you're not culturally competent as far as I'm concerned, but something to think about. Put it on the list of things to do. The fourth and last one is, I think that as educators, you guys need to ensure that school is a space for Black children to be affirmed, protected, and cultivated. So these spaces should not be unsafe for us. We should feel safe there, and we should feel like you guys care and that we're protected there. And I feel like for a lot of Black followers, school hasn't been and isn't about that. And I think that schools should be hiring more Black educators, more Black teachers, more Black groundsmen, more Black, the more interaction that kids can have with other Black followers in these spaces, and non-Indigenous children be having interactions with Black educators, the better. You know, the curriculum, the materials, that everything needs to be Black and must tell the truth about Black people in this country, and the schools cannot enforce policies that disproportionately discipline Black children.
So powerful, Ginny. It's so powerful.
If you're noticing that there are kids who are Black and being suspended and expelled at a much higher rate than non-Indigenous kids, then you are doing exactly what the justice system does to us.
That's right.
It's just a step before, really, if you think about it. This is just
so true.
You're on the way to jail. Go to jail. Do not collect $200. This is what this is. We're just taking a trip around the board for you mob to send us off to jail. And honestly, at this point, it's horrible, but I do feel like the education system is really setting us up, you know, Black followers, Black children up for jail in a lot of ways.
So true, Ginny. It's preparation for it. The uniform, the conformity, the obedience, all of it.
Yeah. And I know, like, if you are a non-Indigenous person, you're watching this podcast and you have been following us for a long time, that you're probably a decent human being.
It's so true. We hope so.
And that you have, you know, you've been able to
switched on.
Exactly. See our perspective and hear our perspective and be able to learn from this. You know, I hope that you hear what we're saying and that some of it resonates with you, and that maybe, you know, in your space, you're trying to create a space that is making Black children feel protected and valued. But we need more people to be doing that. But also, you're the best person to have those conversations with your principal.
That's exactly right.
You're the best person to have those conversations with the deputy principal. You're the best person to have conversation in the staff room about how other Black children are being treated, not us.
No,
you are.
That's right.
And I think, like, my last thing is that obviously we know as Black followers, we have lived experience in now. We've been here for a little while. But, you know, we know that Black kids in Australia are going to face unfortunate and crazy, daunting challenges their whole life, whether we like it or not. This is the way that this happens. Black. Learning in an anti-Black environment should not be one of those things. If you value education, if you really value education, if you really care about, as a teacher, how Indigenous children are being taught, then make sure that your school is one of those places where Black children feel valued and protected. But that's all I have to say. Those are my tips, my top tips.
My gosh.
Get it together,
Ginny, Absolutely loved it. And I think what I loved about those speaking points were they're very practical. We're not expecting you to go out there and, change the whole industry or change the institution. These are practical excuses. And I feel like, Ginny, a lot of the things you said parents can do. So if you have kids in school, these are things that you can do, like go and yarn to the principal, ask for more things in the curriculum. It should be your responsibility.
And I think that's the thing, right? We see what happens when the school decides that they need to do something that's black. Like, we're going to do an event, everyone. Do you have an auntie? Do you have an uncle that could come or do morning tea? We know you mob black food, so if we just put on some food and you mob will show up and we could talk about attendance and we tick the box all the rest. We know we're not dumb. We know that that's what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
And like you said, AJ, I think these are very practical points. These are things that you don't have to create an event for or a barbecue.
That's right.
Like, we don't need the food. We're all good in that space. Just make sure that when we're at school, when our black kids are at school, that they're feeling safe and protected, but also there's kids around them who understand that they are black, but also that historically where we sit in this crazy country that is Australia now. I think it is practical. I think this is like things that we could all do as black parents, as white parents of kids who, are white kids. Do your part, go to school. I mean, when I have kids, I'm going to be right up there.
Right up there. But even like you said, in the auntie role that you have, like even watching my own sister grow up as an auntie, she's taken on that shared responsibility, and that's cultural, guys. And if you are non-Indigenous listening to this, or if you are Indig, we have to follow that idea of culture and that idea of like protecting each other and creating a great community at school. Because if we don't do it as people and as people that love these children and invest in them, who else is going to do it?
And that's exactly what it is, right? It's an investment. It's an investment in a black child. We all win when that child finishes school and goes on and does great things. So, every black child should be looked at the same, and I just think, we need to get it together, because this system, like I said, I really feel like it is just the step before the justice system for us. And we are falling through the cracks at a disproportionate rate compared to non-Indigenous kids. And it's really, really, really sad. Imagine how sad it is watching it happen, but imagine being the kid that falls through the cracks. No hope in hell. No hope in hell. And then guess what? You're never going to get a job.
And we didn't fall through the cracks, did we, Ginny? So we can't even sit here as that perspective and take up that space, because the people that fall through the cracks, where are they now? They're not sitting here on Instagram, creating things. They're not running podcasts. They're in a very different type of circumstance, and that shows the importance of providing them support while they're young.
Get it together, Mom. Sick of this.
Get it together. And we're going to have the list of points that Ginny made. We're going to put together a little flyer or a little list so you guys can screenshot it and reference it, little collage. But other than that, Ginny, do you have any final sentiments for today?
No, just stop. Let's help young black students thrive. Okay?
Let's help young black students
thrive and survive.
Ginny is so powerful. That's it. I just agree with Ginny. And again, guys, like we were yarning earlier in the episode, please understand that we are working hard to create space and speak about issues that we've taught to be ashamed of. I was taught to be ashamed of what happened to me in school, what my parents happened to them as well. So we're really trying to reclaim that truth. So thank you, Ginny, for sharing as well. And it's always an honor.
I'm just looking at myself. I look very white today. I apologize.
Did you guys see the Ginny photos of her when she was a child? I was like, look at this little black kid. I was like, she is just adorable. And your curly little hair as well. You had like curls.
I know. Someone said to me today, cute. One of my friends, he said, your forehead looks way bigger with your hair straight. He was like,
oh, the shade.
Because he's like, I love your curly hair. And he was like,
Ginny, we should do one episode. Curls. I would love to see that.
Okay. Natural.
We'll work on it.
We'll work on it. See? White beauty standards. Okay. You've messed me up now.
Who wants that to be another episode, guys? Let us know if you want us to talk about white beauty standards.
Oh my God. I want it to be another. Hair. Exactly. I'm obsessed. It's bad. But how good does AJ look today? I'm sorry. Let's just take a moment.
Stop it. Even talking.
Watching on YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. Look at this.
And if you're not, go and have a look at my Instagram.
Exactly. If you're not, add the bitch on Instagram and
Rihanna.
Please.
Because I need it. I need the loving.
Don't we all?
Relatable.
This, your mom. This is how you can help us. Go and follow AJ on Instagram now and like all of her pictures, please. Come on.
Stop. Go and follow Ginny and get into.
And then show up at school when school holidays is over and demand justice for us, please.
Yes, that's it. Term
List
2,
of things
2021. Get into it, you guys. No excuses.
Everyone, and literally anyone can go up to the school and say, "What are you, Mob, doing for black fellas in here, and how can we help?"
100%. And is your curriculum, like you said, I love that curriculum element. What are you guys doing in the classrooms?
I want to know, because I'm investing in, even if they're just even if you're a white fella and you have white kids, invest in your children's future, which is one of which they understand the full history of white Australia and black Australia, that looks like. And it's gonna be a hard pill to swallow, I'm sure, but one that's necessary to swallow. We all need to learn this shit.
So true.
Anyway,
well, thank you so much. I was about Ginny. I'm here for it. You know that. Thank you so much for listening, guys. As usual, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be back again next week with a new issue. But if you guys have a new topic or issue in this country, depending what we like, if you guys have anything to contribute, or if you had any thoughts about the education system, or even if you want to share with us your experience at school or what you're doing in your child's school or community to, kind of understand the experience of Indigenous people, let us know.
Let us know. All right, let's get out of here, AJ.
I know, right? All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Unapologetically Black. Be sure to follow us on our Instagram at unapologeticallyblack. You'll find our merch, contact details, and content in the link tree of our Instagram bio. In the meantime, please share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. As Black creators, we're incredibly grateful for your support. Big love, take care, and yarn next week.